Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Hope reading. Excuse me. I think that today we'll probably get through maybe 1.5 chapters. I don't want to cut it too short, and the first chapter isn't all that long. We will just see how far we get. If it takes us some time, I can't always tell these things for sure. Maybe we'll get through one chapter, or maybe I'll leave it in mid-chapter again. We'll just see how it goes. So let's get on to it. Excuse me. Chapter 14, Glandair. The day after the storm, the company kept walking well after the sun went down. They wanted to get beyond the plateau before making camp. No one wanted to chance being caught in another storm on the plateau. The skies were clear and the moon provided some light, so they pressed on. After a simple evening meal, they made their camp near the trailhead at the eastern end of the plateau. The next morning, they rose early and went on. Now they were traveling downhill and the road was much easier. As they gradually descended, the scenery also became greener. There were many small trees and bushes along either side of the path, as well as occasional patches of grass. The land was not beautiful like the Lacinian plain, but it was pretty in its own wild way. At about noon, they came to a large flowing stream. They waded across and took a rest for lunch on the other side, where there was a lush grass patch. Many rabbits and pheasants lived in these parts, so Chad and Shinar had been able to shoot several of both while they walked. Thus, Philor had plenty of meat for their lunch, and he cut the meat into strips and fried it. Hope had also found some edible wild mushrooms nearby, as well as some wild sage and rosemary. Philor fried these with the rabbits and pheasant, and they ate well. Philor was a very good cook, but he was impressed at Hope's ability to improve the taste of even his food by things she found in the land wherever they went. While they ate, he asked her many questions about foraging and where to look for the right herbs. If he was a little bothered by a young, inexperienced girl knowing more than he did about one aspect of cooking, this was outweighed by his desire to be the best cook that he could. He took great pride in his work and wanted to improve it whenever possible. After lunch, they took a long, relaxing break. They earned it by successfully crossing the plateau. Alva knew that this stream was considered to be the western boundary of Glandair's land, but he did not mention this just now. The men knew to be quiet on the trail, and he wanted them to enjoy their rest without thinking about possible dangers in the future, dangers from which there might be no possible escape anyhow. It was foolish to bring Hope through these hills in the first place, he thought. At least what Hellel said on the plateau was true. It was his decision. Whatever may happen, it's not my responsibility. He remembered his promise to Hope. We won't let anything happen to you. He knew he might not be able to keep it, but he would die trying if necessary. He had known of this possible necessity when he made the promise. If it came to that, he'd lived long enough. And with his father already gone, he had nothing to lose. He had never been afraid of dying, at least not since he was a small child, but the thought of what might happen to Hope did disturb him. Hellel's quest was a sticky business, and he was in the thick of it, by contract and by promise. Pardon me, just adjusting something there. Not exactly my own now, he chuckled to himself. Oh well, maybe we'll get lucky and pass through Glandair's land unnoticed. When they had finished resting, they resumed their journey. After some time, the path led through a grove of trees. The trees were short and green, with many branches that were still thick with broad, smooth-edged leaves. They were a certain variety of fruit tree called nuka. They were native to this region and did not lose their leaves in the fall. Their fruit was pear-shaped and, when ripe, was purple in color, soft and juicy. But this was not the right season, and the nuka fruit was still small and green. The trees seemed to brighten as Hope passed, and it seemed as though they reached out their branches toward her. She had never seen this variety of fruit tree before, but she loved them, and she felt like they loved her, too. The trail was wide here, and the company could walk as a group rather than in single file. As they continued, Jagrock turned and looked at Alva, who nodded. "We've got trouble," Alva said calmly to Hellel. "Men, do whatever Alva says," Hellel calmly told the group. "Keep calm," said Alva, "and whatever happens next, do not draw your weapons." Everyone knew something must be up, although most of them saw no sign of trouble. They walked on in silence for a while, when suddenly they heard a voice from beyond view. "Halt! Do not draw your weapons. You are surrounded by archers. You are guilty of trespassing on land owned by His Majesty, King Glandair." "I would speak to your king," said Alva. "I am called Alva, and I have permission to cross this land by the command of Glandair's father, Metatha." "The king is here," said a strong, loud voice, and a large man walked out from behind one of the trees. He was of almost exactly the same height and build as Bonson, but he was thicker in the waist. He had bright blue eyes and long, flowing blonde hair and a blonde beard. "Alva," he said, "it's been a while." "Yes, it has," Alva replied. "Why do your men accost me as a trespasser? You know your father's decree concerning my father's house." "You have permission to be here, Alva, but who are these others? Some of them are Hurons. What do you mean by bringing them into my land without permission?" "Surely your father's decree would include my friends." "I make the decrees of this land now. Of course, my father's decree concerning you stands, but it does not apply to your companions. In fact, I'm sure he never intended it to apply to any Huron." "Perhaps an arrangement can be found," Alva replied. Nodding toward Hellel, he said, "This man is called Hellel. He leads the company, and I know him to be a man of great honor." "He leads the company?" Glandair said, observing Hellel. "I do," said Hellel, "and if any of you know the name Hellel, then you know that I am very wealthy and that I am a man of my word. I will pay you 50,000 gold pieces if you allow us safe passage through your lands." Glandair observed the company. His eyes particularly rested on Hope, making her and the rest of the company very nervous. "I have no need of Huron gold," he said at last. "I have plenty of my own. But, as Alva says, an arrangement can be reached. I will give you safe passage, and all I ask in return is that you give me this beautiful lady traveling with you to take as my wife. Fear not, I'll treat her well." The company stirred. Hellel grabbed Bonson by the arm to prevent him from doing anything rash. "There is a problem with that," Alva replied coolly. "Escorting this young lady to her destination is the reason for our journey." "That is not my concern," Glandair returned. "I'm sure she would rather marry me than see all of her companions dead." Hope became very afraid. The company stayed still for the present. Hellel had told them to listen to Alva, and he seemed to be working to gain control of the situation. Huh. You claim to represent old Lacinia, Alva said sarcastically, yet you break the ancient laws by taking more than one wife. You have 2 already, and now you wish to take a 3rd? If your father wanted the ancient laws enforced, he should have challenged Philon and seized the crown. As it stands, I do represent old Lacinia, and I change the laws as I see fit. My father knew he was not a king. You would do well to take his example. There's another problem, Glandair. I have a prior claim on this lady. Hellel grabbed Bonson by the arm again. He knew Alva was putting a ruse in place. Bonson, on the other hand, instantly thought Alva had brought them in some ploy to seize Hope for himself. This was very unreasonable, of course, but jealous men are seldom reasonable. In that case, Glandair replied, since you claim to love the old Lacinian law so much, I challenge your claim, which means that you and I fight a good old-fashioned Lacinian duel for her hand. His claim is a farce, Bonson blurted out. She is a lady. She can only marry a lord. Besides, a lord can only fight a duel with another lord. I am Lord Bonson. I accept your challenge, and it is with me that you must duel. Glandair looked Bonson over with a smirking smile. There are 2 problems with that, he said mockingly. 1, we're talking about a sword fight, not a beauty contest. And 2, I do not recognize Huron lordship. My mother is Lacinian, Bonson persisted. The daughter of a yellow-tailed crossover lord, no doubt. Sorry, pretty man, that doesn't count. The only other man present whose lordship I recognize is Alva here. But he is not a lord, Bonson said. Glandair roared with laughter. You people don't know who you've got traveling with you, do you? Who? Hope blurted out without thinking. This is Lord Alva Denay, the only living son and heir of Al-Salah Denay the 26th, First Lord of Old Lacinia. He may look like a vagrant, but he's more lord than any man alive besides me. Al-Salah the Butcher? Bonson asked in a shocked tone. Al-Salah the Betrayed, Glandair answered. If you call him Butcher again, my beautiful friend, my archers will turn you into a pincushion, and then you won't be so pretty. The men were shocked at this revelation, all except Hellel. He knew there was some great mystery in Alva's identity, and though he had not guessed the exact truth, something of this magnitude was not surprising. Prior was less shocked than the others. It suddenly made sense how Alva could have defeated him in hand fighting with so little effort. Well, Alva, killing you will be no bother to me. Your father is revered among us, but I never liked you. My father never forgave yours for moving in with goat farmers instead of seizing the throne and finishing the job he started with the Hurons. Of course, he still considered himself under oath, but you never swore an oath. The heir of Al-Salah could have organized quite an insurrection. Men would have followed you just by virtue of the name Denay. I'm very disappointed in you for not taking the kingdom back for the rest of us. I'd have followed you myself. I don't have your name, but I figure that if I kill you, then maybe loyal Lacinians will follow me. Then maybe we can finally drive out the Hurons from our ancestral lands once and for all." "Big words," Alva replied, "but getting yourself killed will not bring you any closer to the throne or to my lady. However, if that's the way you want to play it, it's fine with me. You just tell your men that if I win, they let us pass through the land freely." "Done! You hear that, men?" Glandair's men affirmed that they had. "And when I win, your companions are all free to go, except my beautiful young bride here." Glandair smiled at Hope, and she turned away in disgust. Glandair commanded his men to bring his pair of traditional Lacinian dueling swords. Every noble Lacinian family had such a pair, including the Danaes. They were escorted beyond the grove of trees to an open space more ideal for sword fighting. The traditional dueling swords were large, two-handed swords, the size of those carried by Prior and Bonson. Hellel began to worry. If Alva lost, then of course they would all die defending Hope, but they would die. They could not defeat so many trained warriors, especially when they had so many archers. Alva was playing the best card that he had. If they fought Glandair's men, even Alva would not be much good against so many opponents. Alva was a great swordsman, there was no doubt about that, but he fought with a short sword and dagger. Glandair was immensely larger than Alva, and his frame was perfectly designed to handle swords like these with ease. Alva was clearly at a disadvantage. As they entered the opening, Nira spoke quietly to Alva. "Alva, you should insist on fighting with your own sword and dagger. This is not a fair contest, and Glandair knows it." "And break traditional Lacinian custom?" he asked. "Not to worry. My father taught me how to use every kind of sword. He taught me well." "And so at last our quest will fail because of one man's pride," Nira thought, but she did not speak. "Hope," Alva said, "do you remember what I promised you?" "Yes," Hope said softly. She was trembling with fear. "Well, don't be afraid. I'm going to keep my promise." She knew he wanted to keep it, but Glandair was so big, and he was obviously a great warrior. Hope was not worried for herself now. She was worried that Alva might be killed. She would rather be married to Glandair than see Alva die, but she knew they had come this far only for her. She must hope that Alva could win. The only person who wasn't nervous was Prior. He thought if Alva could throw him, then he could defeat anyone at anything. Pensor knew Alva's ability, but he also knew enough about Glandair to be afraid for his friend. Like Nira said, the swords they were using increased Glandair's advantage significantly. The swords were handed to the duelers, and both men took their positions. They simultaneously touched the hilts to their hearts, then held the blades at full extension and touched the tips together like a pyramid. It was an off-center pyramid because Alva was so much shorter. This was the traditional sign of respect for one's opponent in a Lacinian duel. The men took their guards, nodded to one another, and the duel began. Glandair attacked skillfully and fiercely. Alva's speed enabled him to move and block Glandair's strikes just in time. He wielded the blade skillfully, but the power of Glandair's mighty strokes knocked him about. Over and over again, it seemed like he had moved out of the way or blocked a strike just in the nick of time. Glandair would attack with several blows, and at last Alva would be knocked stumbling back. This happened again and again. Alva gave very little attack because Glandair's might kept him constantly on the defense. The large man handled the great sword like a twig. Hellel could not help but wonder if Bonson would have actually been a better fit for this duel, but what could be done? Glandair did not recognize Bonson's lordship. All the men in the company began to grit their teeth for a last stand. Nera would also fall defending Hope, but she could not believe that her sweet darling would be married to this barbarian. How could it end this way? Alva seemed to be tiring, and the end did not seem far off now. With a mighty swing, Glandair knocked Alva off balance. Alva spun around, bending his body over to regain his balance. With Alva thus bent over, Glandair immediately brought his sword down with lightning speed to finish the duel by slicing the smaller man in half. But Alva's lightning movement was even faster. As Glandair's stroke fell, Alva darted out of the way, spun around, and swung his sword full circle at the back of Glandair's neck. In an instant, all knew that Glandair's head was coming off. But somehow, Alva stopped the sword in mid-swing with the blade touching the back of the great warrior's neck. Every experienced swordsman there, as well as Nera, knew that Alva had to have complete control of every muscle in his body to accomplish such a feat. Even then, it seemed impossible. "Well, my lord," Alva said, "shall I slide my blade down the back of your neck and open up the back of your royal neck? Or will you yield and keep ruling your petty farce of a kingdom?" There was a moment of shocked silence. "I yield," Glandair said at last. "I'd rather die than live with a loss to any other man, but I can live with a loss to the son of Al-Salah-Dene. You have my apology, my blessing on your union, and my invitation to dinner in my hall." "Much appreciated, I'm sure," Alva replied, "but we've delayed too much already. With your permission, we must keep moving." "You have open pass in my lands," Glandair said, "and that includes your companions and any others you choose." "One more thing," Alva said. He looked more like a lord than the company had ever seen him look before. "I have given you your life, Glandair. You treated me unjustly, but I have given you my life." "I own it, Lord Alva." "Someday, I may call upon you for service." "I'll be waiting." "Good," said Alva. Then he looked at Hellel as if to tell him that the company was still in his command. Hellel understood him. "Let us be off," Hellel said. The company moved on in peace. No one spoke for some time. They were all in awe about Alva's real identity, not to mention the shocking end to the duel. Alright, as it turns out, the end of this chapter is actually a good stopping place, so be with us tomorrow for chapter